Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the first event we planned in the spring semester, Informs NCSU chapter. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Amitabh Sinha. He is currently with Amazon in the modeling and optimization group. I'll just introduce him, a little bit background and how I got interacted with him. And then I will give the entire stage for him to discuss today's topic. So Dr. Sinha is basically from a mathematics background. He did his undergrad and master's as an integrated program in mathematics and computational science from IIT Delhi. And after that, he joined Tepper School of Business from Carnegie Mellon. He finished his PhD in algorithms, combinatorics, and optimization. So there, once he finished after this, he joined Rose Business School and he came up to associate professor cadre, and he spent almost 17 years. He is an excellent professor. Some of my friends literally studied and took his course, operations management in Rose Business School. So he's very kind and he accepted my invitation in the fall semester. I welcome you, Dr. Sinha. So currently he's in the optimization and supply chain group in Amazon. He's focusing heavily on network optimization, typically on outbound logistics improvements and what kind of cost reductions can be done. So his research area is actually in touch with omni-channel and e-commerce operations. So it was very well matching. So he decided to take a sabbatical. He went to Amazon, he got interested, and then finally he joined Amazon as a full-time employee. He's right now working in the research science department as a senior manager. I welcome Dr. Sinha once again, and it is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you for, let me turn this computer on mute. Thanks also for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to speak with you all. So let me share my screen and get started. Here we go. Okay, so you can see my screen, yes?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so so I was told I have an hour and a half in total. So here's a sort of a rough agenda. So what I'm going to try and tell you about is the Amazon outbound network structure. I'll define what that means, the outbound network structure, with a particular focus on decision-making under uncertainty, and I'll break it down into different timescales. And this is from a perspective of an operations audience, an OR, industrial engineering type of audience, where a lot of the type of, at least when I was in the university, a lot of the type of research was basically focusing on decision-making in complicated systems. Sometimes uncertainty, sometimes deterministic. Either way, basically sort of kind of system decision-making, right? I'll also, if I have time, I'll also talk about forecasting and hedging. I do want to make sure I have enough time for Q&A, both throughout the talk as well as at the end. So I'll try and wrap the talk part within about 45 minutes. At the very end, when we go into the Q&A, I'll sort of discuss a little bit about working at Amazon, both as an intern and as a full-time employee. I'll take you to our website, which has a bunch of information in that, so we can also talk about those things. The slides, of course, will only be on the first four items, the sort of the technical component. Feel free to ask questions anytime. Okay. I can't see you raise a hand, but just like speak up and ask questions. All right. So let's get moving. So I want to start by showing you what the Amazon network actually looks like. And this is somewhat complicated, so I'm going to sort of slowly describe it to you piece by piece, what all the different components are and how it all works. And then we'll go into the decision-making part, right? So first of all, this is the outbound network. What the outbound network means is that it starts from the fulfillment centers, which is where we keep unsold inventory, and from there getting it to the customer, right? The inbound network, I don't know if you can see my hand, but the inbound network is from supplier to the fulfillment centers, and the outbound network is fulfillment center to end customer. And fulfillment center is where we store unsold inventory, right? So keep that in mind, that's your unsold inventory. And so what happens is when a customer places an order, so think of a customer sitting, at their home and they place an order, a whole bunch of things sort of start happening before the customer eventually gets that order. The first thing we need to figure out is, where exactly do we have that item in stock? So for perspective, the number of fulfillment centers we have in the US is I think around 150 to 200, something of that sort, right? And similar in different countries, like different countries, some are bigger, some are smaller. India and Europe will probably have close to 100 fulfillment centers. New countries like Mexico and Brazil might have like 5 fulfillment centers. But either way, let's focus on the US for now. So about 100, 150 fulfillment centers spread across the country. The first thing we need to figure out is which fulfillment center has that item, right? And it could be like it's in 20 different places or 50 different buildings, maybe in every building. Either way, we figure that out. And then we need to transport it to get it to you, to your end customer, okay? And the way the transportation happens is through a sequence of nodes or buildings, none of which hold inventory. These are all in some sense pure cross-dock type of locations, right? So if we start backwards from the customer, these nodes over here are what we call last mile nodes. And you think of them as Amazon's counterpart of a post office, right? So the idea over here is that packages will come, packages, envelopes, whatever, will come here early in the morning, overnight or early in the morning, and then they will leave in these delivery vans and be delivered throughout the day. Okay? Again, very similar to the postal service where packages get in the middle of the night, they get sorted, and then the postal delivery van goes and delivers it to the customers throughout the day. Okay? And also similar to UPS, FedEx, all these logistics companies. Okay? So how many last mile nodes do we have? Well, in the US, we are at several hundred. I don't know exactly how many, but I don't know, 300, 400, 500 different last mile nodes. Okay. And so now here's the problem, right? You have 100 to 200 fulfillment centers, and you have maybe 300 to 400 last mile nodes, right? The problem is that you cannot connect every fulfillment center to every last mile node, right? Because then the network would become way too complex in terms of the number of trucks in the middle. And so you have to run it through consolidation centers. You have to run it through these buildings, which we'll call middle mile nodes, where many different fulfillment centers supply it. And then from there, it branches out to many different last mile nodes. And in between is where the sortation happens, right? In a way, this is like how airlines operate. Presumably everyone here sort of has taken a flight, right? Airlines often operate these hub and spoke networks. They don't connect every city to every city. If you're in a small city, you first go to the major big hub. Maybe for you all, for many flights, right? Atlanta is going to be the big hub. And then from Atlanta, you can connect to a big city somewhere else and then go to a smaller destination if that's where you need to go, right? And so these middle mile nodes basically serve that purpose of hubs. These are ground hubs. There's also air hubs, right? So we also have air middle mile nodes where we fly packages across the country. And then the last thing that happens, from the pictures, hopefully you can see in the middle mile, all of the transportation happens with trucks, 53-foot trucks. And the last mile, of course, is these last mile nodes, last mile vans. Trucks cannot, deliver in residential neighborhoods, right? So you have to use smaller vehicles here. The last piece I want to point out is this thing called transshipment, which is where we move inventory in between these warehouses, right, from one to the other. And we do it for 2 reasons. Let me pause here just to make sure people are, listening and keeping up with this. There are 2 main reasons for doing transshipments. Any volunteers for what those reasons could be?
Possibly for service constraints or serviceability to improve.
So, you get more specific. What does it mean?
It means how quickly I can serve my customer if there is some service delivery like Amazon Prime or something.
Yes. Okay. So that is true. Yeah. So how quickly can we serve our customers? And that becomes especially true if inventory is off balance across the country, right? That if it's running low in some parts of the country and running high in some, or even completely stocked out in, let's say, the East Coast, but we still have excess inventory in the West Coast, then we would want to rebalance so that when an East Coast customer orders, we can give it to them within 1 day instead of having to, take 5 days to get it from the West Coast. So that's one reason. There's another very different reason why we transship inventory. Anyone else?
Change in modes of transport. Suppose you ship using air transport, you want to ship to freight, which is by land. So.
Yeah, I would argue that that's similar to the service constraint part, right? That you want to place it in a more advantageous place. So, okay, so I'll just jump ahead. The other reason we do it is multi-item order consolidation, right? That sometimes a customer orders 2 items in their order, but the 2 items are in 2 different buildings, right? And so then we have a choice. We can either ship it in 2 different boxes to the end customer, or we can ship one of those items unboxed to the second fulfillment center, put both of them in the same box, and then get it to the end customer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that multi-item order consolidation or split minimization, these are both common industry terms, not just Amazon terms, is the other reason we transship, right? When you have such a wide selection, we'll often have the case where customer orders 2 things, there is no building which has both of those items, right? And so now we have to make a choice. We can ship it in 2 different boxes. That has a certain cost, including, how much capacity it uses and, the environmental impact and all that. Or we can find a way to combine them somewhere and then ship it in one box. Right, so that's the other reason for transshipment. And if you think about it, right, if you think about when these decisions are made, the first one, when you're trying to balance, whether you call it service constraints or capacity, is what you might call proactive transfers. We make those transshipment decisions before the customer places the order, because we are sort of rebalancing inventory for a future order, right? The second one, you make it after the customer orders, right? And the reason why that distinction is important is that after the customer orders, you're on a very tight clock, right? You have to deliver it by like 2 days later or whatever, right? So the transshipment has to happen very quickly for it to be effective. The first one, you can sort of do it whenever you feel like it. If you don't do it, that's okay. You pay a higher cost. Okay. So anyway, this is the outbound network. Let me pause and take more general questions about the shape of this network. Let me say one last thing, and then I'll take questions, right? So this is the outbound network of the part which is in Amazon's control, right? Where the entire way we control it, including these trucks and these Amazon delivery vans, right? Depending on where you live, you also get packages delivered by UPS, the US Postal Service, and in different parts of the world by many other third-party carriers, right? So there's also that. So what we also do is from our fulfillment center, we can give it directly to UPS, and then we don't know what UPS does, but somehow they will deliver it to the end, to your end customer, right? Or somewhere along here, we can give it to USPS, the Postal Service, and then they'll feed it through their network. Again, we don't know what their network looks like, but they will give it to your end customer and destination, right? So what I've described to you is the space that's within Amazon's control. And that's the space I work on, right? Optimizing, designing this network. Where do we have the arcs? Where do we have the nodes? Where do we build how much capacity? How do we ensure connectivity, scheduling, all that? So let me pause and take questions.
One quick question. You were talking about this transshipments between fulfillment centers, right? Suppose if it is a marketplace model, the packages are coming from a third-party supplier, not from Amazon's warehouses. In that scenario, also you do, take the shipment in one transshipment and then couple it into one single package and then send it across, or how that works?
That's a good question. So the marketplace is, the Amazon website where third-party sellers can sell their items, right? So if you look at our marketplace, it actually breaks down into 2 groups, right? There is the fulfilled by Amazon, FBA, and then there is the fulfilled by the seller themselves, right? So this is up to the seller to decide whether they want to be part of FBA or not. If they are not part of FBA, then all we are doing is providing the website and payment service, right? So then we don't touch their stuff, right? The customer orders through our website, we transmit the order to the seller, we pay them when the customer pays us, and then it's up to the seller and they do what they want. They can go to UPS, FedEx, USPS, private delivery, on track, whatever, right? For FBA, what happens is that FBA sellers have already given us their inventory and it's already sitting in our warehouses, okay? And then it becomes a question of what is our contractual terms with each FBA seller, because we charge them fees for the service we provide, right? And so we offer different levels of service that, hey, do you want us to transship your inventory or no, right? And depending on whether you want us to do that or no, we'll charge you a different fee, but also offer a different service, right? That if you don't allow us to transship, then here's what's going to happen. Some of your orders are going to be slower, but the fee that we charge you will be this much. If you allow us to transship, we charge you a little bit more fee because we will do the transshipment, but you'll get this advantage that you can be potentially faster, right? And it's up to the seller to decide, right? I mean, we offer this as a service. So there you go.
Yeah, interesting. That means there will be a lot of contractual agreements between each and every seller and the Amazon as a corporate entity, right?
But yeah, but they're not like handwritten, right? I mean, we offer a menu of services, and when you sign up, you pick which one you want, right? I mean, for very large vendors or sellers, we might have sort of manual contracts, but otherwise, it's just you pick which service level you want.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. More questions? Okay, so let me keep going. Like I said, my space, my work is looking at this outbound network and optimizing it, right? Optimizing in terms of design, planning, execution, all of that stuff. So the question is, when you're optimizing, what are you optimizing for? We're optimizing for the customer, right? Amazon, it's a very customer-oriented company, all that. So we're optimizing for the customer, and we think about what the customer cares about, and then optimize for that, right? So what do the customer cares about? Okay. Typically, for the most part, most of our customers care about some combination of these three things. The first is cost, okay? Not the first, but the first in the slide is cost. Like different customers have different priorities, but the first in the slide is cost, right? By cost, we mean the shipping cost, and you have to think a little bit more carefully here, right? Most customers, we don't charge a shipping cost per order. Most customers are members of Prime, where we charge them an annual fee or a monthly fee for Prime membership. And then when they buy from us, they don't pay anything extra for shipping. Does that make sense? Right? But indirectly, they are paying for the shipping cost, right? I mean, if our shipping cost was high, if this network that I showed you here was very expensive, then the fees for the Prime program would be higher, right? Or in the end, the cost of this network is borne by the end customers, some way or the other, right? Whether we charge them through the Prime program, or we charge them through higher prices, or we charge them through shipping fees or whatever, right? And so the customers do care about cost. The only difference is, exactly how we charge them for it. And so it is important for us to minimize cost. Okay, it's almost obvious, but I just wanted to sort of make that connection, right? The second one is speed, right? Amazon's sort of whole premise, for the past 25 years of existence has been on getting faster and faster and faster, right? I mean, initially it was, we'll get it to you within a week, and then within 2 days, and 1 day, and 2 hours, and all of that stuff, right? So we want to make sure this network is as fast as possible. By the way, if you want, you can Google this Amazon yesterday. This was a commercial we put out like 3 or 4 years ago about how we're getting so fast that we can deliver it to you before you even order. And it's a goofy commercial. It's just a joke, right? And that how that creates, the time travel problems and stuff like that. Anyway, and the third biggest thing we care about is selection. Amazon there was the famous book, The Everything Store. That is our aspiration. We want to sell everything and make sure every customer can get whatever they want. Anyone want to give a guess in terms of orders of magnitude? So, to the nearest power of 10, how many different items we sell in the US?
Maybe 100 million.
10 million is what I'd say.
100 million?
12 million.
Yeah, so it's closer to 100. Yeah, it's closer to 100 million, over 100 million. And for reference, anyone have the same number for a single Walmart store?
My guess will be less than that.
A single Walmart store?
A single Walmart, the largest possible Walmart store in the US, the single Walmart store.
I mean, I'd say probably 1 million on that. Although I was
So the last number I have is, the last number I have is 400 to 500,000, which is fine. It could be close to 1 million now, right?
Wow.
But either way, you see the order of magnitude difference, right, of everything. So, and again, in defense of Walmart, I love Walmart. They're a great company, right? I mean, it's good to have good competition. There is Walmart.com, which also has, 100. I don't know about. I don't want to quote them, but well over the selection of a single store. But in terms of the customer experience, right, that's what we're looking at, right? As a brick and mortar store, you're going to be in the order of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, versus this worldwide network where you're in the order of 100 million items, right? So there you go. So we want to sell, the total number of items we sell is over 100 million. By the way, this includes those third-party sellers, the fulfillment by Amazon stuff that we talked about earlier. Right, and that's the idea, that we offer this as a service to on the Amazon marketplace to say anyone who wants to sell anything can get on the store, not at an eBay level of just like manually curated items, but at least like well-defined items which have barcodes and so on. And that's one of our key drivers to expand selection, right? I mean, FBA was basically created, the marketplace was basically created to expand selection. So the interesting thing is that when you have these three objective functions, right, optimizing for any two out of those three is actually pretty easy. And I'll show you how. Optimizing for all three is incredibly hard, and that's what keeps me busy, right? So if you only cared for cost and selection and did not care about speed, what you would do is put one giant warehouse in the middle of the country and move everything by truck. Okay, and there's a couple of things to keep in mind, right? If you're familiar with, depending on the coursework you're doing with inventory theory and all that, right? You know that the amount of safety stock and the amount of inventory you need to keep when you have more locations is going to be much higher, and you benefit by consolidating into a single location, right? So when I say that the cost is the lowest with a single location, it's both economies of scale, but also that your safety stock gets minimized because you serve all of the demand by a single location, right? So you keep a single location, move everything by truck. All of your trucks will always be full because they're all starting from the same place, and you have all the selection you want, plenty of space, but it will be really, really slow, right? Then you say, okay, if I want to choose for speed and selection, but don't worry about cost, then I could have these gigantic warehouses which can keep every single item, but put them all over the country. So now I get faster, but I have to spend a lot more money in capital to build all these giant warehouses. And in every warehouse, I have to keep my entire selection of 100 million items, right? Even though some of those items might be selling, the total US nationwide sales might be one per week on some of those items, right? Many of our items are in fact like that, right? The long tail, right? If you think about, for instance, fashion goods, apparel, right? Clothes, right? One item in clothing means a shirt in a particular size, in a particular color with a particular cut, right? When you think about all these size, color, cut combinations, then absolutely for a single item, a single one of those combinations, you might be selling one per week in the whole country, right? And if you wanted to replicate enough safety stock for that demand in 20 different warehouses, then yeah, that's going to cost you a heck of a lot of money in inventory holding cost and in the capital cost of tied up inventory and so on. So this strategy will blow up your cost, but will give you speed and selection, right? Or you could keep a network of really small FCs and only sell the top selling 20,000 items or the top selling 10,000 items, right? That gives you cost and speed, but it destroys the selection. Instead of 100 million, you're now only selling 20,000, right? And in some sense, this is like the convenience store model, right? That's the whole idea. It's a convenience store. It's very convenient, right? Like Walgreens or 7-Eleven or whatever. It's very convenient. It's nearby. You can get stuff very cheaply and very quickly because they're well spread across where the population centers are. But they have even a much smaller selection than Walmart, right? 20,000 items, 50,000 items, and so on. Right. So 2 out of 3 is pretty easy. 3 out of 4 is really, really hard. 3 out of 3 is really, really hard, right? And this requires trade-offs, and that's what me and my team do, right? How do you try to optimize for all 3, and where do you do the trade-offs? Where do you sacrifice cost? Where do you sacrifice speed? We never sacrifice selection in the sense that we never tell a customer you cannot buy this, but we can tell the customer that you can get this. It'll just take 7 days instead of 1 day because it's coming from across the country. Right. And so that's what happens in the trade-off between selection and speed or selection and cost. Right. And now over the past 1 year and picking up very quickly, I would say 1.5 years and picking up very quickly, there's a 4th objective function, which is climate, right? So I don't know how many of you kept track of this, but we signed the climate pledge. And basically we have committed as a company to drive net carbon down to 0 by 2040. Okay. So first of all, let me clarify what the 0, and then let me clarify the net carbon. So 0 by 2040 is 0 across everything. Okay, our entire company will be 0 carbon by 2040, including packaging and the carbon that is burnt to create packaging, including obviously trucks moving and vans moving and airplanes flying. Including the electricity needed to run our buildings, not just our fulfillment centers and our nodes, but the electricity like I'm working from home, but the electricity in our offices, including the carbon impact to create the Alexa devices and the Kindle Fire and all that. Where else do we burn carbon? I mean, basically every single carbon thing will go to 0, okay, by 2040. This is a hard commitment, right? I mean, I'm spending enough time on this that I know that we really care about this, right? there is that qualifier that it's net carbon. What that means is that for some amount of it, we will not be able to completely stop burning carbon. So we will still spend the carbon, but we will generate it through renewable resources or offset it from the trading market, right? So either, like if we are going to deliver packages, right? The only way to deliver packages, you're going to burn energy of some kind, whether it's a battery electric vehicle or a gas vehicle, that's up to you, but it's going to take energy, and that energy has to come from somewhere. And for the most part, hopefully it'll come from renewable sources like, solar or wind or whatever. But some amount we may still have to use gasoline, in which case we'll offset it by, through the carbon trading market or by planting trees or whatever, right? This thing exists for the net carbon. We are not going to use it to cheat. And the very simple reason is that right now, the total amount of carbon offsets available in the world is not enough for the amount of carbon Amazon emits today, right? So this is not a safety valve that we can use. We can't just say that, yeah, we can just meet this goal by just buying the carbon offsets. There is just not enough carbon offsets, right? So the only way to meet this goal is initially to drive our emissions down to zero as much as possible. And then for the last little bit, use the carbon offsets, right? And since the goal is 2040 and right now it's 2021, right now all our efforts are focused on this, right? That what do we need to do now to invest in technology and capital and facilities that puts us on a path to be almost zero by 2040, and then at the last minute we will do some trading. Does that make sense? Okay, so let me pause there and see if there are more questions about before I go into decision making about our 3 and then the 4th objective function.
I have a question about the speed of distribution. I think I have missed the first 10 minutes of the meeting. Maybe you have already discussed about it. How does the speed of distribution, is that, do you consider it similar to be minimizing cost of distribution as well? Or cost of distribution is not a matter?
It's not. No. So it's not, right? So here we go, right? We care about cost and speed, right? If we only cared about speed but not about cost, for one thing, we would, okay. So if we only cared about cost, not about speed, for one thing is we would never have any airplanes, okay? Airplanes are much more expensive per package per mile than trucks, right? So if we only cared about cost, we would never have airplanes. Okay. So the two are not the same. And then when it comes to speed, the other big part is that you can meet speed by moving stuff faster, but also by having more stuff closer to the customer to begin with, right? And this is what I was talking about, one giant warehouse in the middle of the country or lots of warehouses spread where the customers are, right? But if I spread the warehouses where the customers are and have it closer to begin with, I need more inventory, right? So that means that's going to cost me more. It's going to cost me more I have to have more buildings and more inventory, and that's the cost, but I will be able to get it faster to you because I already have it pretty much, within 50 miles of where you live, right? So these are some of the big trade-offs between speed and cost, and you can go deeper into it. There's many more trade-offs, but yeah.
I guess I was talking about the cost of distribution itself, like that the truck cost, the delivery cost itself. Is it included in the cost criteria?
Yes. So the delivery cost absolutely is included in the cost. So okay. So if you're looking at that, then definitely the trucks versus airplanes matters. Yes. So that cost is included there. And then the other part that matters there is density, right? So if you remember what I described earlier, right? We have these delivery vans that leave in the morning and spend the whole day delivering packages, right? If you think about how that operation works, it means by definition, if you order something after the van has already left, you'd only get it the next day, right? Because the van is going to spend the whole day delivering packages and coming back, right? We could make the van deliver packages only for 3 hours, come back, pick up more packages, deliver for 3 hours, come back, right? That will make the delivery time more like 6 hours. You order it, within a few hours, the van will be back to the warehouse, pick up stuff and redeliver, right? That is how our Prime Now service operates. So Prime Now is only in a small number of cities, but that's what they do, right? But the flip side of that is that your van is only carrying enough packages. I mean, you could have a smaller vehicle, but you're still going to pay for, it's still going to be more per package, is only carrying a small number of packages, right? The single biggest component of cost in almost every part of our operation is human labor, Okay. So, and the reason I'm telling you that is so that, shifting from a large van to a small van does not actually save much money, because in both cases, you're paying for one human to drive it, right? It saves a little bit of money. The small truck van might be a little bit cheaper, spends a little bit less gas, but the biggest cost driver is going to be the driver's salary, and that's still the same, whether you have a big van or a small van. Right. More questions?
So I have a question about this transshipment. You told this transshipment is being done in two cases. One case is to balance the inventory of the fulfillment centers, and the other one is for multi-order consolidation. So there is movement of because of these two reasons. Are there any other reasons? And I want to know, like, what percentage you transfer some X amount.
I can't give you numbers. No numbers.
Okay. So which will be high or low? That, like, because of which reason you do that for this transshipment high? Like, which reason contributes?
So honestly, yeah. So higher or lower depends on business operating conditions, right? And I'll give you some examples, right? During peak, right? Our peak is December, right? December is our busiest month, right? During peak, we are much more focused on just getting stuff out of the buildings and delivering it to customers. We don't have spare labor or building or truck capacity to move inventory around. Okay, so during peak, there's very little transshipment because we're just getting stuff out, right? Off peak, there is more opportunity to transship. And then when you think about it, January is going to be when our inventory is most off balance, right? Because we've just come off peak, and in peak, we've basically just absorbed all the variability by getting stuff out, right? So January would be a good time to rebalance inventory. And in January, we have fewer orders anyway, right? So we have less of an opportunity for multi-order consolidation. So yeah, so I can't give you numbers. There is no that one is bigger than the other. It's that under different business conditions throughout the year, these things become bigger and smaller.
Yeah, it's very clear. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Sinha, I have a question, probably two questions. One is on the demand side of it. As a network optimization person or in your team, it's very difficult in a random demand, especially it's a growing demand, and we really don't know which demand is going to originate. So how are you going to keep this demand as a variable in a deterministic model, for that matter, if you're solving a network optimization problem? Any ideas?
That's exactly what I'm getting to. So the next section of my talk is decision-making under uncertainty. And one of the uncertainties, the biggest uncertainty, is actually demand.
Oh, so you're going to touch about that. Oh, okay, fine. Then I'll reserve that question for time being. The second question I was interested is on the returns part. Suppose if someone is getting a parcel and they are going to return it back, then that supply chain is also going to travel in the same supply chain which you showed in the beginning, right? So there will be a forward supply chain and then there will be a reverse supply chain. And how actually you manage that entire operations? I just wanted to know that basic background.
Okay, so that's a great question. The return supply chain operates a little bit differently. So it still has to end at the fulfillment center so that we can resell it then, right? But it doesn't actually travel in reverse through this entire supply chain because the return flows are going to be too thin to take advantage of these flows, right? So for instance, the forward supply chain, you're sending large trucks which are carrying, 2,000 cubic feet or something of that sort, right? The proportion of that that's going to get returned is going to be much smaller, right? So you don't want to spend the same truck sort of coming back carrying 50 cubic feet of packages that are returned, right? So your return supply chain, you need to sort of consolidate or design for based on its characteristics of flows where they're coming from, right? And with returns, you have to do returns processing first before you take it to a fulfillment center. When a customer returns an item, right, there are basically three things you can do to it, okay? Either it is so badly damaged, it was so badly defective that you cannot resell it. So you send it to basically salvage, you send it to junk, okay? Or there are contractual terms with the vendor, especially if it is FBA or marketplace, where we just take it and take a picture and give it to them. That this is your stuff, the customer returned it, do what you want, right? Fix it, trash it, whatever, right? And the third option is that they send it back to us, it looks good enough that we just restock it in IFCs, right? So the return supply chain from the customer, it actually takes it to a small number of buildings where we have this capability to do the returns processing. Okay. And then once we decide from there where it needs to go, then we take it to the fulfillment centers or send it to the supplier or trash it.
Oh, okay, okay. So that's interesting. So that means along with the fulfillment center, there are some small buildings associated or connected adjacent to it. Is it right?
Well, so these returns processing will not be they're all over the place. They can be independent buildings, they can be inside fulfillment centers, they can be inside middle mile nodes. So I mean, like I described to you 3 types of buildings, well 4, middle mile, last mile, airports, and FCs, but we actually have like hundreds of different kinds of buildings, right? We have buildings for returns, we have buildings for make on demand, right? So we print books on demand if needed, so we have that. We have different types of buildings for furniture and sort of bulky items. We, of course, have the Whole Foods network, so the Whole Foods types of buildings for perishable items and fresh items and so on. So yeah, I mean, we have tons of different types of buildings, right? I just described to you the core retail network, which is the biggest component of Amazon, but there's much more than that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we are at 40 minutes past. I'm going to go a little bit fast through this notion of decision making, and then I'll save for more Q&A. Okay, so the way I'm going to break down, I'm talking about network optimization and decision making. I'm going to break it down into different time scales. That what are the short-term decisions, real-time decisions, medium-term, and long-term. Okay, the real-time decisions we have to make. By real-time, I mean that the customer has just now ordered an item. Okay, they've just clicked, and they expect the item tomorrow. Okay, for a lot of customers, we offer this one-day delivery, right? Or maybe day after tomorrow, whatever, right? And we need to figure out the decision to make is which fulfillment path to choose for the package. That means which building has it, which FC has it, and how should I take it? Should I take it through this network, this sequence of arrows at the bottom? Should I fly it, the sequence of arrows at the top? Should I just give it to UPS over here and then let UPS deal with it? Obviously I have to pay them. Should I take it through this network where I just go directly to the last mile node, bypass the middle mile, and then take it there, right? That's the decision that needs to be made. The state information is, well, inventory availability, so which building has the item, but also the transportation capacity, right? If I want to send it by this path, for instance, I need to know that there's enough space on this truck and enough space on this truck to send the package, right? And if the truck is already full, then I have to think about my next best option, right? Which might be that send it from this building instead and send it on the direct arc, right? So those are some types of real-time decisions that we have to make as soon as the customer places an order. The uncertainty, again, is going to be sort of future demand, right? That even if I use this truck to send this item, what will the future demand look like and how will that consume this truck? And if there's a lot of demand expected on this truck, maybe I should send it from further away and reserve this capacity for later orders and so on. Okay. So that's the real time. Let me just jump through all and then I'll just go into sort of main Q&A. The next level is the short-term decision making. My definition of short-term is days to weeks. Okay. And here the idea is, again, if you just focus on the decisions, think about truck schedule, right? I said that there's a truck going from here to here. That truck needs to be scheduled at least a few days in advance, potentially even a few weeks in advance. And the reason is, again, the single biggest entity at the center of our supply chains are human drivers, right? We cannot tell a human driver to just, on demand, okay, now you drive for 16 hours from Seattle to Denver or something of that sort, right? We need to give them a defined schedule so that they know when they should show up for work, when they should expect to drive, when they'll be back home, when will they get their 3-day break or whatever. And so the truck schedules needs to be planned days or weeks in advance at least. So that is the short-term decision horizon. Likewise, inventory, right? Our inventory replenishment, I mean, you've presumably seen all these continuous review and periodic review inventory models, right? So we also operate those same things. For whichever you do, continuous review or periodic review, right? Your lead time is going to be several days. In some cases, if it's coming from abroad, it's going to be up to like a few months. And then even that's just the lead time. And then even if you're doing periodic review, your review period is going to be around 1 week or something of that sort, right? So this is the short-term decision making space. Again, the biggest uncertainty is going to be future demand, right? Especially when you're doing things like inventory management and all that. What are customers going to buy? How much are they going to buy and all that? The next set I'll call is medium term. And medium term is mostly, like the biggest example of this is building insulation. Where should I build new buildings, and what capability should I configure in them, and how big should they be? Okay, and you know, you start thinking about going from the short-term decisions to the medium-term decisions. The medium-term decisions are now one-way decisions, right? And what that means is, sort of, if you go back here, these are two-way decisions in the sense that if I schedule a truck and the truck is running empty, then after a week or so, I can unschedule it. I can say, you know what, there's no point running a truck from point A to point B, right? Or if I decide to buy some amount of inventory and I made the wrong decision, I bought too much inventory, okay, so I'm going to pay a little bit more in holding costs, but after a few weeks or months, it'll catch up, right? Or if I buy too little inventory, then again, you know, I might have some unmet demand, but in 3 or 4 days, I can reorder and then boost my inventory back up, right? So these decisions are all two-way decisions. There are, you know, you can reverse it, you can change it, you can make recourse action. These decisions are one-way in the sense that once I build a new building, the building is going to cost me tens of millions, if not over $100 million to build. If that was the wrong decision, that's the $100 million that is wasted, right? So in that sense, these one-way decisions need a much more careful thinking before you make these decisions, right? That's what it says here, significant human oversight. But at the same time, these also need to be scalable processes made very quickly in the face of uncertainty, right? I mean, we talked about how we have 200 fulfillment centers, a few hundred last mile nodes, which means, and that's in a 25-year history of the company, right? Which means every year we are adding dozens of new buildings, right? So even though there's a significant amount of human oversight, you still need a scalable technical, I mean, basically an optimization model and an OR facility location type of model to help you make these decisions. And then you manually look at the output of your optimization model to decide where to put the building and where not to, and the sensitivity and all that. Okay. And the last set of decision making is what I would call long term, right? So especially when you think about net zero carbon, right? The decisions we are making here are one-way decisions, but they are one-way with long lead time and significant uncertainty, right? So for example, one example over here is, should we completely electrify our trucks? Should we switch completely to electric trucks? Okay. We haven't made any such decision yet, but obviously we are thinking about it, right? This causes huge challenges because there is not enough charging capability in America for electric trucks. There is charging capability for electric cars, but not for electric trucks, okay? So then the question becomes, okay, should we invest in our own charging capability? In all of our own buildings, should we install these electric truck chargers, right? But then also, charging an electric truck battery is going to take a lot more time than refueling the gas, right? But if we want to be a fast network, then that means that we have to have extra trucks to drive while the other ones are charging, right? And so now we're definitely talking billions of dollars because, well, how many extra trucks do I want to buy off this new technology and also install charging stations, basically completely change the way we do business. And you know, there'll be no going back because we've spent so much money 5 or 10 years down the line, right? So here there's significant human oversight and large downside risk. If we make the wrong decision, it's going to be sort of really, really hard. But we do have to make these decisions within the next few years if we want to meet our 2040 goals, right? So anyway, that is the scale of sort of long-term decision making. Let me pause here and take questions about the 4 scales of decision making I described here. Here's a summary of the types of decisions. Anyone with questions?
I've got a quick question about electric vehicles. That's something that I'm very interested in. It makes sense to me that if you're stating the Amazon's climate pledge is an actual constraint and not just something that you're trying to reach, something that you must reach by 2040, the electric trucks or some sort of carbon reduction in transportation is absolutely necessary. So I guess my question is, are you willing to break the bank in order to meet that, or is that just going to be a bridge too far?
That is a question for one person whose first name starts with J and second last name starts with B. Okay.
All right, I'll send him an email. Then.
Right now, yeah, absolutely. It's jeff@amazon.com. It's well known. You can Google it, right? At my low level, right now, the mandate is research every possible, or not every possible, but the ones that we get told to research, the impact and the cost of adopting such a technology and how we would operate a supply chain in that, right? The guidance to us, from Jeff Bezos is very, very clear that the 2040 goal is not negotiable. And you explore all possible options and then give him the options and give him the bill, and then he decides how much he's willing to break the bank.
Is there an actual, so I have a friend who does the same sort of thing in GM, and there is a group of operations researchers who think about how they're moving towards electric vehicles for the same sort of reason. Is there set aside groups that only think about how to reach this?
Absolutely. So I can segue a little bit into the Amazon Science part, right? So Amazon has okay, again, another of those numbers I'm going to ask you to guess. How many PhD scientists do you think Amazon has? So PhDs working on scientific fields, not just like, PhDs working on scientific fields. Any guesses?
5,000.
Anyone? Yeah, 5,000 is about right. Okay. This includes, operations researchers, but it also includes economists. It also includes aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, language specialists for, Alexa voice, natural translation, etc. Right? But absolutely, we have groups of scientists working on exploring what types of physical technologies we will need to invest in to make these things happen. Yeah, it's just a big enough company. Some of it I don't know about. Some of it is actually secret, and so I'm not allowed to know about it. But yeah, short answer, absolutely, we have tons of scientists working on very different pieces of these questions.
I have a question about the impact of that decision of zero carbon. So I'm guessing that that pledge, whether that's environmentally sound and there is an ethical part of it, but I'm guessing that may create a positive reinforcement along and may bring new customers as well. Or I'm not really sure whether the total demand may go up or down. So are you thinking about it? And if you're thinking about it, how do you think you can model that demand?
That's a great question. In my world, we are not thinking about it. My world is focused on the transportation network design. I would imagine that some people are thinking about it. I have no idea if people are actually thinking and how they might be modeling.
Okay, all right. Because I was thinking that if there is a huge fluctuation in demand, that may impact your number of trucks you may require or anything else.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's a very valid question. And it wouldn't surprise me if there are groups looking at it. I wouldn't know.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yep. More questions?
I have one. So when it comes to design of the large scale infrastructure, particularly on buildings and stuff, how would you go about policies? Like, government policies or regulatory policies? Some are, the initial design of the network might be
absolutely
kind of like estimated by government incentives. As you progress, California might go more stringent, or they don't want certain kind of stuff. Then you need to move the warehouses. How do you consider that in a model, mathematical model, to say?
Yeah, this is a great question, right? So it depends on which model you're using at what level of abstraction, right? So let me give you two examples. Let me give you my example, right? So when we think about our airplane model, the airline model, the government regulations are much more stringent on airplanes than on trucks, right? For obvious reasons, right? The mandated crew rest and the mandated gap between takeoff and departure and visibility conditions, like a whole bunch of regulations are much more, right? So for the air network scheduling and network design, we have optimization models that take pretty much as many of these government regulations as they can very strongly and put them as constraints. Okay. For trucks, what happens is that, obviously we have to respect government regulations, but the impact of changing a decision afterwards to align it with government regulations is somewhat less because, okay, well, instead of one driver, I might need two drivers so that after 10 hours we can switch, or instead of a 18-hour transit time, it might become 28 hours because of the 10-hour break and so on, right? So the trade-off you have to make is that how many details do you want to put in your optimization model, and how much do you need to do via post-processing or sort of approximation, right? If we put every single government detail into the truck scheduling model, it'll blow up. It'll never work, right? But then I know that I can do a high-level sort of a network design model for scheduling trucks, and then post-process the results to account for, when I have to have a team driver versus a solo driver, when do I have to put the mandated rest breaks, that I won't lose too much. So for trucks, we prefer to do that. For planes, we know that if we try to do that, it'll break the schedule completely. So we do need to have the government regulations inside the optimization model. Yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question. I mean, feel free to ask follow-ups.
Yes,
yeah,
I mean, it kind of makes some sense. It's just that, some policies which I'm not aware about the present, how would you consider the future policies which might come in place? For example, Brexit, nobody expected that, but it came in place. And
that was chaos, yeah.
Yeah, so then you
need to no, for Brexit, we had no choice but to make plan A, plan B, plan C, right? Okay. And I mean, I don't know how much you all followed the Brexit story, but it was pretty chaotic, right? Because like, first of all, it was coronavirus plus Brexit both happening at the same time, right? And then I forget which date it was. I think it was December 19th or 18th or 17th or something of that sort, right? Just before Christmas, where France did a complete shutdown of the border from UK to France, right? And there was a 3,000 truck backlog just outside the tunnel in the UK going into France, right? And like, we just got, I mean, like, sometimes you just pay the price for it, right? We just had to cancel customer orders when it was a customer in France who ordered some inventory item that was coming from Britain. And it was sitting in a truck which was blocked, which was basically shut down. The tunnel was shuttered. We had no idea when it would open. That's the time we had to do, our worst case option is to tell a customer, sorry, we are canceling your order, right? So we did have to do that when we were going into this shutdown. But otherwise, like, we basically had, two plans, well, maybe more than two, but there was definitely one plan for a hard Brexit, that if the border completely shuts down, what does that network look like? Because the Europe network was, at least before Brexit, was pretty tightly integrated. And then there was one for a more flexible Brexit, where there would be enough sort of UK to mainland Europe flows that it would pretty much not affect our business. And then different plans for scenarios in between. So yeah, those are really hard scenarios to plan for. And sometimes you just have to eat it, right? You just have to pay the price for, nothing we can do at this point.
Gotcha. And I have another question on the carbon credits. Do you buy retrospect count credits, which is saved by Amazon as a business, from a business prospect? For example, if I need to go and buy one single item in my nearby HEB or any of the local grocery, I might produce some carbon. But with Amazon, I get everything to my home. So in some sense, the overall fundamental equation, Amazon bringing a driving value to economy, is like reducing carbon being produced by individuals as a whole. Because, we have one truck which is delivering to 100 neighborhoods rather than 100 neighborhoods driving towards the next door grocer. Does it comes into consideration?
We do not count carbon saved by other people driving less. Absolutely not.
Okay.
We just say our carbon, Amazon produced carbon, needs to go to zero.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are details in our carbon accounting. I honestly don't know enough about it, but yeah, we would not do that. Count carbon saved by other people.
No, I get it. Yeah, I just kind of curious whether it's kind of consideration.
Yeah.
It's overall value to the game, right? So yeah.
I agree with you. But our mandate is very, very clear. What we signed in the climate pledge is very clear, that Amazon's carbon will be net zero, right? Regardless of what anyone else does. Gotcha. And so we are working towards that goal. Yeah, so okay, so it's 12:57. Well, in the Pacific zone. I'm going to skip this little bit of uncertainty. I want to talk about a little bit about working at Amazon. Give enough justice to that, and then it's up to you. You guys can run the Q&A and go bounce between topics, right? So I don't know if this is new to you, but I do want to show you this website, Amazon.science, right? If you do want to look at both the research that Amazon does, the scientific innovation at Amazon, as well as working at Amazon as a scientist or as an intern. If you're in a master's or PhD program, you should go to this website. It's a one-stop starting place. I'll take you to the website and walk you through it. It's not intended for like MBAs and stuff. It's intended for masters and PhDs and faculty members in science and engineering fields. Okay. So if you haven't checked it out, go to Amazon.science. Let me go there and screen share. Okay, I already think, right? So among other things, it has things like sort of basically updates on research that we're doing, conferences that we go to, our little blog and all that. And then let me go into the careers part. Okay, so conferences where we are going. So if you attend any of these conferences, including Informs, we always have a booth at Informs. You can sort of check us out, and there'll be recruiters over there, and you can drop your resume as well as find out chat with scientists and chat with Amazonians over there that what kind of work are you doing and so on. The landing page for looking.
Are you sharing the screen, Amazon.science? Because
I was trying to share the screen. Is it not sharing or new share? Okay, sorry. I don't use Zoom very often. My apologies. There we go.
Yeah, now it is
clear. Can you see now?
Please. Yeah, it is clear.
Okay,
please
no, thanks for catching that. Yeah. My default screen sharing program just shares the entire screen. It doesn't pick and choose, so I missed that. Okay, here we go. So Amazon.science is a one-stop. Yeah, you could still hear me, right? Okay, so it's a one-stop place where we have research areas, conferences. So here you have the list of upcoming conferences. Again, Informs will show up here at the right time. And then if you click the careers tab, that's where you can search for full-time and intern positions. And I just want to walk you through the intern part because there's one quick point I want to make. So let's say you search for internships in the US. What we do over here in this page is we basically put placeholder interns. It's not that we have just one OR internship open. It's just that this is a single link where we pool all our internship offerings, and you just apply over here, and then based on your background, they'll filter you to the right department, right? So even though it shows over here that it's only one opening, it's not one opening. It's one link for many people to apply, and then you sort of go from there. So that's the sort of single biggest place to, and this also has for full-time positions as well, right? That's the single biggest place to look if you're looking for jobs at Amazon, intern or full-time. Let me pause there and let's take a few questions on that part, on working at Amazon. And you can talk to me about whatever you want, about interviewing, about what it's like to work in Amazon, about, career growth, or how to search for positions, whatever you want. And then we can head back to the science part of the talk if we have time. So open it up. Anyone there? If there are no questions, feel free to ask questions back about the supply chain, whatever you want.
As far as supply chain is concerned, my question on the demand part. So how are you taking the demand as a number for your short-term and medium-term models? Because that number is important.
That number is important. So we actually do not do deterministic planning. We do scenario planning. So we also don't do full stochastic planning, but we do scenario planning, right? That we always have a forecast that has a mean, and then it has confidence intervals. Our demand is too complex for us to say the 95th confidence and the 5th confidence interval. Like we don't do 5 percentile, 95 percentile. In fact, we don't do percentiles at all because the demand is too complex and you can't come up with normal distributions and stuff like that, right? But we do come with baseline scenario, a high demand scenario, a low demand scenario, and then there could be an extra high and an extra low and so on. These are created by our forecasting team, which starts with confidence intervals, but then does other overlays. Like I'll give you an example of overlay, right? So right now, the US administration, the Biden administration is trying to figure out if they can pass a second stimulus check, right? If the second stimulus check comes, we will see an increase in demand, right? For sure, right? I don't know how much, but we will see it, right? Modeling that is going to be very hard. How do you put that in any forecasting model with a confidence interval, right? You can't do that. That's a one-off thing that requires human expertise to try and assess that, okay, Well, look at the political news every day and try to figure out, is the stimulus going to pass or not? When is it going to come? How big is it going to be? How much of an impact will it have on our demand, right? And this is why our high scenario will include the impact of the stimulus. Our baseline will not include the stimulus, but the high and the baseline is not going to come from a confidence interval. It's going to come from manual thinking of what the impact of the stimulus will be like. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that gives some signal. But suppose if we wanted to take the baseline scenario only, even for that, how are we going to generate data? Typically demand, is it like some region wise based on some economic factors or some machine learning, or you are going to bring in some demographic factors?
All of those. Yeah, I mean, we have a very large forecasting team. Absolutely. It looks like demographic factors. It looks like history. It looks like, and it needs to forecast not at the item level, but at the product family level, right? We sell 100 million items, right? So we're not going to get a forecast that for each item, what is the demand in each location per day, right? But we can get that, okay, for each location per day, what's the demand going to be for food items versus apparel versus electronics items versus furniture, etc., right? And then that is what we plan our supply chain on. It's at the location, time horizon, and product family level.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Dr. Sinha, I have a couple questions. Okay, the first topic would be, you said you're definitely using a multi-criteria optimization model. So I personally work with for my PhD thesis, I'm working with a multi-criteria optimization model in non-profit supply chain, which is kind of different. But I just wanted to ask you, the first question on that is that, how do you prioritize your criteria? Like, what is the weight you are putting in all of these criteria, and how do you determine that?
So we don't prioritize. We let the models be flexible, that they can do for either. We can change the weights. And depending on the decision being made and the constraints we have and who we are talking to in terms of sort of the business partners, it gives us the flexibility to change those, right? Sometimes we get asked that, okay, optimize for speed and tell us how much that's going to cost. That way, Mr. Bezos can make a decision, how much more is he willing to invest to try and make our network faster. And sometimes it is that, okay, well, we already have everything, like if you're planning for just next week, we already have everything in place. So you can't actually build any new buildings to try to minimize cost, right? And so we want to have that flexibility of choosing the criteria.
Okay, so you're saying that basically the preference changes over time.
It changes over time, and it also, it changes over time. It changes depending on who the audience is, what they care about, etc.
Okay. And my second question and the second topic is data structure and algorithm. So personally, when I'm developing a optimization model, and it's basically I'm either using a Gurobi solver or something like that, which is kind of like a black box basically. So you have these inputs, and then call Gurobi and solve it. So there is this question that comes up, that it is important for us as an optimizer to know how this data structure and algorithm, but I just don't find how I can implement it. Why can I implement it? And the question I have is that, how do you implement it? If you are implementing it right now, how do you implement the knowledge of data structure and algorithm to get a better and more efficient modeling?
This is an excellent question. Because we are dealing with this, me and my team are dealing with this like right now, including yesterday we had a meeting on some of this, right? So first some context, right? So in Amazon, we use FICO Express as the solver. Okay, so we have the standard corporate license, right? Absolutely, we face the same problems that, okay, well, if you're using Express, we don't necessarily know what's happening inside, and we need to play with all those parameters to try and make it work. And then sometimes we use different parameters for different problems, but the only way to really figure that out is to try it out and see what happens, right? The second part is that, yes, there is a huge importance for, okay, so these problems, these optimization problems that described to you, right? They are complex enough that in reality, what we do in Amazon is break it down and solve different pieces and then connect them, as opposed to jointly optimize everything, right? One of the classic places where we break it down is we separate location decisions, facility location decisions from network design, right? I mean, like in theory, absolutely, you can put network design and facility location in the same MIP model, mixed integer programming model. But in reality, at Amazon scale, that's going to break, so it doesn't work, right? So we separate the two and then try to couple them together, right? But when you try to couple them together, you have to pass data back and forth between the two, right? I'm almost embarrassed to say that right now, the way we pass data back and forth is through CSV files, okay, comma separated value CSV files, right? And we absolutely recognize that that's not the right way to do it. We need to have more efficient underlying data structures for these two things to communicate with each other. And I mean, these are just two, there are many more, right? To make it much more efficient, especially when it's a common data element, like when you have 6 different MIP models sitting on top, and 4 of them share the same underlying element, then it makes it even more important to have a nice data structure instead of passing that same CSV file to 4 different things, right? Unfortunately, for that, we are not there yet, at least in my world, right? I mean, again, Amazon has tons of scientists. There might well be in other parts of the company that they have very efficient data structures, but in my network planning world, yeah, right now we are in the space of CSV files, trying to figure out what data structure we should engineer to make it work. We absolutely recognize that CSV files is not scalable.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have one other question, which is I'm really interested about. Is you talked about that your total number of, I would say SKU, stock keeping units, or whatever, or however you define it, is around 100 million. So if I'm thinking about in terms of an optimization model, that's 100 million multiplied by how many of the routes you're considering. So that's like a huge problem. So one of the things I usually think when I have this huge number of variables, is like creating some sort of segmentation. So do you like maybe have you ever thought about it, or maybe you have applied some idea of segmenting the products, the SKU or the assortment you have?
No, we do, absolutely. Yeah. So like I said, in our world, we only operate at the level of product family, right? We don't do it at the individual item level. In other parts of the company, absolutely, they do segmentation, right? I mean, like if you think about even just going to our webpage and seeing, customers who bought this also purchase these other items, right? Right there, there's segmentation happening, right? So yeah, for different applications, we do different levels of clustering and segmentation and all that for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
One question from the slides which you showed on the real-time basis. Could you just go back to that slide?
Sure. Find it. All right, let me share my screen there. There you go.
Oh, yeah. So in this particular slide, we understand how the scenario works, what kind of decision are we talking about. But taking a decision for every kind of demand originates from different customer origins. Is it automated using some decision support system, or is it some kind
absolutely.
of... Okay, so that means whenever we place an order from the customer point of view, it will automatically go back to the decision support system, and the decision is taken so that it will go to the vehicle routing and other stuff. Is it like that?
Yep. Completely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, these real-time systems are all completely automated. The research is in, continuing to optimize those solvers that make these decisions. Yeah, but real-time decisions have no human touch at all.
Okay. Another question on the food supply chain, like Whole Foods and stuff, and we have 3 hours delivery, that kind of a model, right? So in that scenario, suppose we have, Amazon fulfillment model. I'm not talking about marketplace. So we stock, the vegetables, the groceries at our warehouse, and then the customer places an order and things go happen. My question here is, suppose this is perishables, right? And there is a life shelf life for any vegetable or fruits. How Amazon is minimizing that loss? What is your ideas and strategy that you keep in your modeling approach or in your scheduling approach, so that how much to purchase? It's not a simple model as news vendor model, but I'm just coming from that idea.
Yeah. No, so there are news vendor models for perishable inventory, right? There's actually a whole amount of academic literature on that, news vendor for perishable inventory. And I know basically for many of these things, right? We take the best scientific models, we customize it for Amazon, and we operate it our way. So roughly speaking, that's what we do. We use newsvendor, or not newsvendor, I mean, they're continuous review models, right? So continuous review inventory models for perishable inventory, and we work with that, right? So one of the things that you have to, that works in our advantage is that, compared to a standard grocery store, if we are the seller, we have the ability to operate first in, first out, right? So like in a traditional retail store, right, when people go to buy milk, and if there are 2 bottles of milk with 2 different expiration dates, most customers will pick up the one that has a later expiration date, right? That will last longer, even if they're planning to finish it within the next 2 days, and the other one is going to, still has 2 weeks of shelf life, right? Like most customers will do, right? Whereas in our case, as long as it meets legal requirements, and as long as it's not obviously damaged or old and the bananas are like falling off, right? As long as it's nice, right? We can give you the first in, first out in terms of expiration date. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And so for perishable inventory management, that is a little bit of an advantage, right? When you can actually operate FIFO or actually get the perishable inventory out before it perishes, as opposed to the grocery store, where if customers don't pick it up, it's going to go bad, right? But yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
Okay. So do you solve this inventory problems at the middle mile nodes or fulfillment center wise, or you will consider the entire multi-echelon supply chain and then optimize for best inventory policy?
No, so inventory management only goes to the fulfillment center, right? The middle miles are cross-dock. They are not inventory management at all.
Oh, okay.
Right? So inventory management is only at the fulfillment centers. Yeah. So I mean, like we actually break it down into 2 different pieces. There's inventory control and there's inventory placement. Again, it's everything Amazon has to decouple because these problems become so large scale, right? Right. Inventory control is how much to buy. Inventory placement is where to put it, in which FC to put it, right? And we decompose it that way. Obviously, they are interrelated. If I put it in just one FC, I have to buy less inventory if I put it in, right? So there's obviously interrelationship there. But like I said, many problems in Amazon, we break it down. They are interrelated. We find ways to couple them a little bit.
Okay. And do you follow by any chance? Of course, Amazon is an e-commerce player, so it's mostly like whatever customers demand, and there'll be a forecasting team. Accordingly, we will have some policies. But do you by any chance follow some kind of make to order? I mean, suppose if customer is placing an order, accordingly, I'll purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I won't purchase. Something of that kind of a model. Do you follow?
Yeah. No, absolutely. We have.
It will be?
No. So we have make to order for certainly for Amazon Books and some other stuff. And then also, what else do we have make to order on? I know we have it for books. For many other things, it becomes harder because you also want to be fast to customers, right? So you want to do make to order only for things that you can actually make within a couple of hours max, right? I mean, so you can print books in a couple of hours. I don't know what else there would be. Good question. Yeah, I don't know. I know that books are in this category. I don't know what else might be in this category.
Okay. I think people have already left the panel.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I mean, we are 1:16. I have to start another meeting at 1:30 anyway, so I'm also happy to stop a few minutes early and get some water and all that.
Any other questions? Any participants answered? Abilan?
That's fine. I mean, it was really great talk, Dr. Sinha. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. No, my pleasure. Happy to be here. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we learned a lot of new things, especially about Amazon's outbound supply chain. We will definitely come back to you if there is one good occasion to connect, and then we would love to invite you and host the session again for our students. Thanks once again.
My pleasure. Thank you. All the best. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Take care and have a great weekend too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, Balan.
Hey. Hi.
Did he share his email ID?
Yeah, he put it in the screen, right? The last slide.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you did not notice that?
I missed that.